Latin. Hey guys, what's up? It's your girl Ray
and Kat.
Welcome to Modern Outreach. Did you miss us from last week?
Well, we're back.
We're back
with more content.
Period. Recap time, Kat.
Last week we talked about you're in housing. What now? What comes after that? I feel like we had a really good conversation. I feel like we talked a lot about community, a lot about building a routine, life skills. So I just want to also just, again, emphasize how it really is that everyone moves at their own pace with it. And some people it takes a couple weeks, sometimes it takes a couple years. And even if you don't get it right the first time, just keep adjusting, keep trying new things. Like, you're gonna find something that's gonna stick eventually. Definitely take some time though. So just wanted to mention that.
Amaze.
What about you? Any recap for us?
No, I think you hit it on the nail.
Cool.
It's gonna take some time. But you got all the time in the world, so your house now.
True. Like, there's no deadline.
Yeah.
Just keep paying your rent. And
yes.
You're good.
Pay your rent.
Please. But anyway, let's jump right into today's episode. What is the topic for today, Ray?
I'm so happy you asked. Today's topic is, how do you live with the homeless? Controversial, is it?
It's true. It's true.
Isn't that a little play on live with the homeless? What do we mean by that?
Let's talk about the stigma around homeless. The word homeless, the idea of being homeless. You've probably heard us refer to it more so as unhoused. The reason why we are starting to avoid talking about the unhoused population with the term homeless is because of the stigma around it. It comes with such negative connotations now, and I think it's oftentimes misrepresenting the bigger issues that we're seeing, the bigger barriers to housing retention. When someone gets housing, when someone is moving in, they have their housing, they have that stability. There's still like this association with being homeless or experiencing homelessness that still kind of follows them, even when like that term really does not apply at all anymore. Thanks. Like, homeless implies like it literally means without home. So once you have that home, suddenly those other issues, that is what becomes at like the forefront. That becomes the main problem. But everyone, like the community around, neighbors, I think oftentimes there's this like, oh, like, not in my backyard, like I don't want that community around me. But the truth is, like, these are, for me, I think these are problems that you see whether you're in housing or not. You have drug users, you have substance abusers in homes. They maybe didn't start out experiencing homelessness and then end up in housing. So I just think that's kind of breaking away from this negative connotation around homelessness and having this label, because like the truth is the label really is kind of meaningless. It really is. As soon as that door closes, like, that label's gone. Yeah. You're not homeless.
Absolutely. For sure. Yeah. Everything.
Off my soapbox.
Dude, you killed that. No, for sure. But at the same time, again, kind of piggybacking off of our last episode, so that transitional period, once you get housed, there is this like gray fuzzy area in which someone's trying to adapt, number one, to being housed, to having neighbors, to having a system, to even getting on an elevator, maybe going up to a floor. All those small things that we never take into consideration, this person has to kind of get through it and learn it and understand it, and then, you know, adapt to it all. And so I want to talk about some things, they could possibly be barriers, but I want people who are living in typical housing, and maybe you do get a neighbor that's coming off of street homelessness or out of shelter or whatever, and maybe they are still adapting and you don't know how to handle that. So if someone is having an issue with hygiene, which a lot of people from street homelessness, this does occur, okay? A lot of it has to do with their previous traumas. So I want people to identify those things with trauma. Always, always not a what's wrong with you, but a different approach to like what happened to you. Yeah. That is the approach that you should be having when someone, not like, oh, here comes my neighbor and we're going to exchange places on the elevator. I'm going to hold my nose and make a horrible statement that I want them to hear. That is pushing more trauma on someone. And does that make you feel good at the end of the day? Like, what does that do exactly? How do you work around that? And what do you say to that neighbor? Number one, you don't say anything at all. First and foremost, unless you want to say hello, how are you? Good to see you. Do not mention anything about that neighbor's hygiene whatsoever. That's a touchy subject in which hopefully that person is connected to the proper resources and their professional person is working with them on those things. And so whether it is due to mental health or their past traumas, there's something blocking that person from their hygienic needs. And so just, if you don't want to see that person, walk the opposite way. Wait until they get off the elevator, walk back to the elevator when they're gone, and get on the elevator. Work around those things, I used to carry a little small spray with me when I worked in shelter. I also had a whole thing plugged in that would burst.
Like a diffuser?
Like a diffuser. Yeah. In my office I had a, I can't think of any of the words now. The thing that cleans the air. Purifier. Air purifier. It'll come to me. An air purifier in my room, and I would just adjust, honestly. And so those are that's one thing that I would suggest one to do, working around that person just to help that person get through whatever they're going through.
I'm glad that you brought up treating people with respect, and not kind of putting them in this box about based off of your initial judgment of them, because again, it's not who they what was it, who they are is what happened to you.
Yeah, not what's wrong with you, but what happened to you.
I really like that statement, just because again, it's focusing on the circumstance, not necessarily having that be what that person is. Yeah. And I think finding a positive way of engaging with your neighbors it goes so far. I mean, just even a smile or a friendly hi, it's that's your community, whether or not you like it, that's your neighbor, and it's going to be a much more pleasant experience if you start off on that right foot and you extend that kindness and that welcoming, because treating that person that way, they're going to be much more willing to engage with you back, and yeah, at the end of the day, just treating others how you want to be treated, and leading with that kindness, because you don't know what they've been through, you don't know what that trauma is, and it's a process of transitioning out of homelessness and transitioning into housing. So I think having grace with the fact that there will be bumps in that period, but it's really about how it's resolved and how it's handled moving forward. Mm-hmm. That really makes a difference, I think.
For sure.
Yeah,
and I can't tell you how important it is, that statement that you made, building rapport with a neighbor like that means so much to them because you're acknowledging them as a human being, which a lot of people have not. Looked over them, walked over them, ignored them. So for you to be willing to get to know somebody, in which if they do have a hygiene concern, it'd be more prevalent for you to get to know them, to see who they are, to maybe perhaps help them around that.
Yes.
And for them to be open with you about that, and to kind of create that gap, or to create that bridge, is really, really important to somebody in that situation. With that being said, another point that I would like to bring up is when dealing with someone coming from street homelessness as a neighbor, I want to talk about how, again, judging a book by its cover is something that we just do naturally in society. But someone who is experiencing severe mental health, you know, especially nowadays, because buildings are made so cheap, I will say, that the walls are very, very thin. If you're living in an older building, like, you might have some leeway, but if it's a newer building, you can hear everything next door. And so hearing someone going through psychosis, which are episodes of severe mental health, whether they're hearing voices, screaming things, throwing things, acting kind of out of pocket, all that is driven by severe mental health. And it intensifies, especially if they are using a substance. So any substance, no matter if it's weed, cocaine, whatever, even alcohol, it doesn't matter. It's going to trigger their chemical imbalance, and they're just going to go off, especially if they're not on medication. So usually when someone in these situations, they are not connected to mental health, and haven't been. Like, for years and years, people go through their neighbor going through psychosis, and they're calling the police. They're doing all these things. They're trying to get them evicted. They're going to the manager. They're complaining. They're filming. They're taping it. They're sending emails. I mean, literally, it's a part-time job. And so how do we help something like that? Because the landlord cannot. And we'll go into that later, but the landlord can't. And so, again, when you see that person outside, if they don't speak to you, it's okay too, you know, but reach out anyway. You know, I find it really cute when a neighbor puts a note in my door. Hey, I'm your new neighbor. My name's so-and-so. I live in unit so-and-so. If you need anything, let me know. You know, that's really cute.
When you said note, my first thought was like a bad note, like oh, like let me a note.
Like, I could not sleep last night.
I'm your new neighbor. Nice to meet you. Shut the hell up. See you around.
You might get one of those too.
Could be either one.
You can do either one. But the nice one would probably help you more. It's
only passive aggressive notes.
It's
you're
a
starting
wobbler.
a war.
Honestly,
You're starting a war. No, but
I'm just thinking about ways that you can, like, reach out to this neighbor.
No, it's a good idea.
Because, like, how else are you gonna do it otherwise? Like, hey, you keep on yelling and screaming, like.
But that goes back to what your point was about, like, if you're able to, like, build some form of, like, friendliness or, like, connection, those conversations are a lot easier. If, like, I mean, it's so much easier to tell your friend, like, hey, can, like, you turn it down a little bit, to someone that you've never spoken to in your entire life.
Yeah, and, like, yo, if it's bothering you that much, number one, please don't call the cops.
Oh.
The cops are not trained. They are not trauma-informed care, especially now. Let's be real. So just never call the cops at all costs.
I'd like to plug a resource.
Okay, go ahead.
I'm forgetting the exact name, but we'll definitely link it. It's a mental health crisis emergency team that you can call as an alternative to calling the police.
Oh, the pet team.
Yes, thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. It's been a while.
No worries.
But that's a really good alternative if
Yes.
you feel like there is an emergency and you do not feel comfortable calling the cops. Call them instead.
Sure.
They might take a little bit longer, but they are specifically trained in mental health support. They will not... I don't think they have weapons or anything like that. No, it's
They're coming with batons.
It's a needle.
They're coming with batons. They're coming with the double shot. Oh, and those are really good. Shout out to Venice Family Clinic for those shots for people with severe schizophrenia. Straight up, they work. They're amazing. Utilize medications, people. They work. But yeah, on.
That's... Call that resource, don't call the cops.
Yeah, please don't call the cops, please. Please don't call the cops on people. Like, I'm terrified of the cops, especially now, but I don't even want to know what the cops would do with, like, severe mental health at this point.
But, like, if you're home safe and you're hearing your neighbor and that's why you're, like, that's not a reason to call your cops. Not your cops. Your cops. The cops.
The cops.
We don't need that part.
You're so right. Yes, do not call the cops. Okay. Sorry, but who you can call, you can also call like Dee Dee Hirsch or Department of Mental Health and talk to someone who picks up the phone and explain the situation. Maybe they'll have some alternatives that could help you. Maybe perhaps they could come out. You never know. So just be very vocal with professionals and see if you really want to help somebody, or if you're just like in the business of just ruining people's lives. But like, and some people are, all the Karens in the world, but like literally if you're not one of those and you sincerely want to help someone, then call a mental health provider.
Crisis helplines. Yes. Yeah. Like they can even talk you through like how to de-escalate a situation, or like if you're not feeling like you want to engage in whatever is going on, at least very least you're doing them a service by reaching out for support to the right resources.
Exactly.
Like emphasizing that. Like that's the goal at the end of the day, because it's not that they were experiencing homelessness, it's not that the fact that they like their history is from it's that it is either substance use, it is either mental health, it is something.
Yes.
But it is something that can be addressed with the proper care and the right support, you know?
Absolutely. And, you know, a lot of people, they're like, well, I have kids. Okay, yes, absolutely. I get that. If you living in LA, baby, your kids know what a homeless person is by now. Kids are very aware and extremely smart and very like inquisitive about homeless people. A lot of parents do take the time out and explain how one would become that way, and some don't. But if you do have a person who's coming from street homelessness, they deserve to have the opportunity to live around anyone. And so again, creating an environment for someone where they feel safe as well is really important. A lot of people give out like negative energy, or they're very rude and disrespectful to a person coming off the street, especially just being protective, especially if you have kids. But honestly, the best way to go about it is to show your kids how to successfully be a neighbor to a person getting off the street. And so set the example instead of creating more stigma around a homeless person, especially for kids, because they're fragile, and they see so many things at an early age. Yes, it's kind of hard to understand those things, but at the same time, if that's their neighbor, that's their neighbor. And so, yeah.
And not every person that's coming out of that's going into housing from being on the street or being unhoused, not everyone is dealing with like a severe trauma or mental health. Like, there are some people that literally just needed a little assistance getting back into housing, and they are going to be perfectly fine. Like, obviously there is some transition, but again, like, going back to like that stigma of like, just because you knew that person isn't coming from a house from before or an apartment from before, it doesn't mean that what they're going through, and it doesn't mean that they are going through these things that maybe you think that they are going through. So really, again, just it's about taking the time to get to know someone as a person and not coming in with judgment or existing ideas of what their past might look like or what they're planning on doing while they're in housing. I think you get a lot of intrusive questions, I think, especially like once you're getting into that point, because people are like, oh, like, what's your story? I think sometimes property managers get really personal with like who they're bringing in, and like they want to know what that story is.
Yeah, unfortunately, some do like screen people, which they should not be doing, and some don't. In the market rate world, yeah, they judging you straight up, point blank, period. In the market world, if you're doing like affordable housing below market rate, I feel like they have a little bit more understanding of where you're coming from and will work with you as much as they possibly can. Do the fair housing laws. Fair housing laws kind of holds or ties the landlord's hands in a lot of way with focusing on these barriers that get people evicted, like mental health, like substance use, all those things. And so if they can't necessarily reach an outside source to help the person out, which is kind of them going above and beyond, then unfortunately, if that person is going against something on their lease, they're subject to be given a 3-day notice. And so that's why it's so important to understand where they're coming from, give them the allotted time, work with them. Don't run to your property management every time you hear a whistle out of your... Don't run to your property manager, like when you hear a whistle out of somebody, or, they were saying something through the walls for a couple of hours. Reach the proper professionals, and then after that, try to get to know your neighbor. At least that's my suggestion. That'll help someone out. That'll give someone an opportunity, at least an opportunity to get their lives together and what they need in order.
Because what you're doing by doing that is you're creating that community that, like we said in the last episode, like, community is so critical with that housing retention. And it's very easy to say like, oh, like, they probably have someone taking care of them. Oh, they probably have support. But most of the people that I've worked with that are in housing, like, not most, like, there are some that have community, that have family and friends, but there's a lot that they really don't have a lot of people checking in on them. And sometimes, like, my visit is the one time that they're seeing someone for the day for the past like few days. So I think those small actions could really go a long way, just because, again, you don't know what they're going through. You don't know what their experience was with housing prior. So it's always good to know your neighbors.
Yeah, for sure.
Just in general.
Yeah. So we talked about mental health a whole lot. What's next?
Let's talk about substance abuse.
Okay.
When someone's housed, we've talked about getting connected to resources, how important it is to bridge that gap. It's hard to know where to step in and where you're being a concerned citizen or where you're overstepping and getting up in someone's business that maybe that is not your business. Karen.
Karen.
Karen. Emphasis on the A. You know who you are. It's not your problem.
You're watching right now, like, please.
Leave them alone. There is a difference between caring about your neighbor and wanting to look out for them and just being nosy and all up in their business.
These are for your addiction.
Let them use drugs in peace.
Just
kidding. No.
You are such an advocate for the people. Look at you. Let them get high. Leave them alone.
Let's be very clear, that is not where I stand. Get your help, please. Seek help. But what I'm trying to say.
What are you trying to say?
If you recognize that someone is abusing substances and you do want to help them, navigating that conversation is so important, because they're not necessarily going to listen to you if they don't know who you are, first of all. Offering up advice that they didn't ask for. You're not going to be successful in getting your point across. If you were able to have a positive relationship with someone, it's a lot easier, again, when it comes to substance abuse, to encourage using less, encourage stopping altogether, encourage seeking help, seeking support. Again, that goes so much further when it's from someone that you trust and someone that you love, even if it's family members, whatever that might be. Letting family members know at time, well,
it depends.
In the right context.
It's a wobbler.
In the right context. You don't want to just be offering out that information, but seeking help in the right places is more so the point I'm trying to make.
Yeah.
And not overstepping to the point where you're hurting rather than helping. So I think
that.
Finding that line can be challenging at times. But yeah, I mean, let us know if you do have questions about navigating those conversations, because I'd really love to kind of open up that as a conversation of maybe situations that have come up for you, but you haven't really known how to respond to them. That's something I think we could really talk about more in future episodes.
Yeah, definitely. I will say though about having a neighbor that might be smoking crystal meth in the backyard or on the stairwell of your apartment, or you see them, or hell, you can smell it through the vents and all of those things, because that does exist. I would suggest that, number one, you get really familiarized with harm reduction. Harm reduction could be learned by anyone, doesn't matter, Google it.
Yes.
And what you could do is you could provide something called Narcan to whoever it is. And Narcan, you can pick it up at any clinic and or shelter. Go downtown. They should have plenty of Narcan facilities that you can grab some Narcan. And maybe you could buy some offline if you really care. And if you do have a close one, a neighbor or whatever, you can offer that, because it doesn't necessarily mean anything. It means that just in case that they have something that could possibly save their lives, and they could keep it on them. Sure, they're not going to be using the Narcan on themselves. That's not the point of Narcan. But once they do overdose, then someone could check on them and find the Narcan to save them. So it's really important that you learn harm reduction, getting to know how to definitely create that, number one, communication with them, number two, offering your help, number three, providing them with Narcan. And then you can sleep at night knowing that you did something that's extremely valuable to someone who might need it.
And if you really are concerned and you feel like something might have happened, you can always communicate to the property manager or landlord that they need to do like a wellness check, reach out to an emergency contact. I think at the if last resort, I think that's always.
Yeah, I mean, I've done wellness checks for sure.
Yeah, that's what I mean. So like.
Yeah, we do wellness checks for that. Also DV as well. So.
Yeah. So. Yeah, I mean, every circumstance is going to be a little different. So, knowing the right way to respond to each situation, I think that's important. And it's always helpful to educate yourself on what's appropriate, what's not appropriate, and what the local resources are in your neighborhood. And everyone should be carrying Narcan at this point.
Yeah, seriously.
You never know when you're going to observe an overdose.
Yeah, and or yourself, because it's in everything. So, you just got to be safe.
Like an EpiPen.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, how to coexist with people who are coming off the street into housing. It is definitely a learning experience. It's up and down, but it is normal. Okay? People are people no matter what. Everyone deserves to have a safe place to live and a community, an environment that's welcoming, understanding, and not just them adapting to you, but you also adapting to them. And that will help, like, not only in your small community, but that will bleed into hopefully surrounding communities in the world around us, because all we need is each other and to understand and better love each other.
Get to know your neighbors.
Yeah. And hell, we live in LA. This is earthquake city, people. So yeah, let the next big earthquake come and you're stuck in your house and stuff, and you hear your neighbor walking out of theirs and you don't know your neighbor and you're banging on the door and you can't even call your neighbor for help. So you better get to know your neighbor. You don't even know their name. You don't know who you'll need, okay? A neighbor, all my life, neighbors have came through and saved me from something one way or the other. Whether it was a flat tire, whether it was somebody trying to come into my house, whatever. A neighbor is valuable.
I'm going to go meet some of my neighbors right now.
I'm your neighbor. Hi, neighbor.
Hi, neighbor.
Anyway, so if you liked this episode, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And Kat is gonna hit the button now. Like, comment, and subscribe.
Like, comment, and subscribe. Please. And thank you.
Konnichiwa.